Well, hello there, kitties. This is going to be hopefully a very easy repair, a very quick video, but I just want to show you some of the easy, simple little stuff that I get that, honestly, if you have a soldering iron and you're not an idiot, you could probably fix this shit yourself. But I'm glad some people can't because it means I get to make money. So, it's a little custom amplifier. It's got a 1/4-inch mic input and a 1/4-inch guitar input and random effects and stuff. It's for acoustic guitars. I've been told that the mic line input, if you move it around, you can get it to make and break contact. Can pretty much guarantee that the solder joints are broken where the jack is soldered onto the PCB. So it's pretty much the way all modern amps are made today, and they all eventually fail in the exact same fashion. Sometimes it takes the jack out with it and you've got to replace the jack as well. Sometimes you can just clean it up, resolder it, put it back together. So we're going to open this up quick, and I'm going to do this in real time because I don't like editing. You love watching me take screws out of the back of an amplifier, don't you? Dirty little screwdriver watcher person. Look at this beautiful, cheap bullshit. Yeah, and we're not going to be able to see anything on that board without pulling all the screws off of the top of this so that we can get a look at the connections on the other side. So these have no set screws, so that makes things easier in theory. Sometimes I'll get a screwdriver just to help me get them moving, and then they'll pop right off. Nothing wants to easily come loose for me here today. It's amazing how many different price points of amplifiers have these type of issues. It's definitely not just the cheap ones, and it kind of depends on what your version of cheap is. You know, a lot of guys who are into the boutique stuff would tell you that a Fender Hot Rod Deluxe or Hot Rod DeVille is a cheap amplifier, and for a tube amplifier it is pretty cheap. They use cheap components, they use PC boards, but they use the same style of jack and they have the same style of issues, and you know, those amps can be upwards of $800-900 when they're brand new, which for most of us is a lot of money, me included. Whereas this amplifier was, I don't know, if I had to guess, it's probably like $399 new. Maybe even less than that. And it's got the same thing going on. Just makes it quicker and easier for people to manufacture, I guess. And of course, one of the pots that they use has to have a different size screw or nut, excuse me. telling you, the bench fee covers the amount of time it takes your tech to take all the fucking screws out of your stuff. Alright. And we've got 2 screws on the heat sink there. There's 1. 2. Fish out the lock washer that came off with it. It dropped into the bottom. We'll find that later. Oh, there it is. Is this loose now? Yeah. I'm not gonna unhook anything unless I find I actually have to. I can already tell that I'm not gonna be able to get this down far enough without removing this. So, let's see if this wrench will fit. Excuse my head. Of course, everything about these jacks is plastic except for the contacts, because they've got to keep this stuff as cheap as possible to produce so they can make the most money they possibly can. It's funny, I've been into a lot of, vintage amps over time, and even the amps that would have been considered cheap back in the day, student model stuff, was still made with, US made iron and US made capacitors and US made tube stuff, which obviously, the meaning of that has changed over the years, but that used to be a pretty big deal. Yep. So I'm going to see if I can get you in here and I'll show you exactly what the issue is. Got you in as close as my old ass handy cam would allow me, and then of course I immediately bump it. So if you can't already see, if you look at that, you can see that it's got movement. And there's sort of little circles around all of these. And that's because the solder joints have broken around those connectors. This is the only good one. All these other 3 are all like that. Interestingly, looking at the regular input, which I would imagine is used more often, none of those are having any issues. I'm still going to reflow the solder joints on them because I'm already behind this board. It's just a good thing to do while you're in here. Oh, and now, hold on, let me move you a little bit here. Apologies for my practically vintage handy cam here. Same exact problem is going on with the little push power switch here. We've got another cracked solder joint over here, which over time you're going to go to switch it on and nothing's going to happen. So we'll get in there and reflow those solder joints as well. Looking at the back of the effects board, I don't see any kind of issues on that board. So it should be okay there. always like to look at the legs of the transistors as well. They often get hot enough that they can exhibit similar issues. Yeah, I don't think that they're bad, but once again, I think I'm just going to touch those with some fresh solder just to make sure. Other than that, everything in this looks pretty much normal. Apologies for me smacking the microphone. So, and this jack is looking good otherwise, so we're going to go ahead and reflow those solder joints and the other ones that we've looked at, and this thing will be good to go again. Probably clean off some of the schmutz while we're at it too. So let me zoom you back out. Move the camera out of my way, and you'll see how simple this is about to be. Soldering station over here. Tend to solder at fairly high temperatures. Again, apologies for all the random sounds you're getting on this video. I got a free Rode shotgun microphone that hopefully isn't in frame here. It's pretty darn close. It's right here. But I got it for free from somebody, and it gives me a little bit better audio than what the little Canon Vixia HFR 700 gives me. So I've been using it. Alright, I've got some temperature into the soldering iron here. Now typically, unless you're working on something extremely old, there's really no reason to suck out all the old solder before you put new stuff in. This isn't so old that, you know, the solder has lost its, you know, properties. It's not, you know, oxidized a bunch or anything like that. It's simply just cracked from the stress of being used. So I'm not going to be able to give you a great angle. You're just going to have to trust me that I'm doing what I say I'm doing here. I'm going to take this off its standoff so I can get this to lay out flat for me. Hey, there we go. Get out the old pound of caster solder here. Tin the tip a little bit. Get some fresh solder on there. When I'm doing jacks like this, I typically leave the heat on it a little bit longer than I even need to, just to make sure that I don't get any sort of cold joint. Is it necessary? I don't know, but I'm gonna do it anyway. It's just my way. Just make sure that all the fresh stuff is really flowing down into that joint. I just realized I hopped over what I was what I was doing here. Another thing I always like to take a close look at is the legs where the potentiometers are on the board, and I can see that this one is cracked, this one is cracked. So once again, I'm just going to come through here, a little bit of fresh solder on the tip. Reflow that joint. Usually when I find one cracked one on something, I'll do all of them
whether or not they're all cracked. Because if one's been stressed out, the others have probably been stressed out too. So you might as well, while you're in here and you got the soldering iron and the solder in your hand, make sure they're all happy. A lot of the stuff that's made these days, they're not using leaded solder, and it has a tendency to crack under stress a lot easier than the old like 60-40. That one looks good. Get over here to this power switch. Get a nice fresh fat blob of solder on there. So there you go. Nice and simple and quick. Apologies for my bald head in your face. Just getting a good look at everything in here. Touch this one up a little bit better. I just like to get this stuff right in my face and really make sure that I didn't miss anything. You don't want somebody calling you back and saying, hey, you just worked on my amp and it's not working. Or, you know, it worked for a minute and then it stopped working. You gotta take it all back apart again. And also, you know, it just fucks up your reputation when people gotta bring stuff back to you all the time. So, you know, I try not to do that. Cool, everything's looking good. These pots are feeling pretty darn difficult to turn. So, while I'm in here, I'm going to grab my contact cleaner. And if I can find it, well, maybe I can't find it. I keep one of my can straws that I have melted into a little J-hook at the end. So when I'm cleaning PC board mounted pots like this, that it's impossible to get a cleaning tip into, I can use my little J-hooked one to get the cleaner inside the pots. I'm actually going to pause this and see if I can find that. I'll be right back. There we go. See, I've made a little hook for it at the end here so that I can get up underneath these. I actually just trimmed a bit off. I used to have a sort of a complete U here, but I think that just this little 90 will do great. This is one of those extra things I do that, you know, I'm already charging them a little bit of money because of the fact that I had to take the whole thing apart. So I might as well make sure that, you know, the pots aren't scratchy and impossible to turn, stuff like that. I would imagine on video you can see when it gets easier for me to turn these as well. And that's not even necessarily my aim, you know, to make them easier to turn. I mean, I think it's helpful when they get really stiff, but I just want to make sure that they're not all scratchy. I'm not going to do any cleaning to the digital coding thing here. Digital encoder, that's the word I was looking for. And while we're in here, just shoot a tiny bit of cleaner into these jacks. Get in here with a Q-tip and just clean out some of the junk. Especially on these amplifiers where they point straight up, they're constantly getting dust and dirt and dog slobber and weed and all sorts of fun things in them. So it's good to clean them out while you're in there. Well, there we go. That should be repair complete. So now we're going to stick this thing back together and give it a quick test. Hilariously large LED. Oh, you know what? Before I put that back in, let's just give this a good wipe. There, much better. If you're noticing the plastic on my arm, I got my tube tattoo touched up this morning. The RCA logo was fading and I didn't like it, so went and had it touched up. Oh, so we'll just get everything started here. Let me make sure you guys are still looking at the right thing. Yeah, you're not really. Annoyingly, these don't all even seem to use the same. Well, maybe they are the same. Trying to decide if some of these washers are thicker than the others. You can tell this one's been on the top of the amplifier because it's nice and dusty. Don't throw out your old toothbrushes, people. Get those nice and finger tight. Then we can come through here. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, why isn't he testing that? Because I've done lots of these. And we saw with our own eyeballs why that input was being iffy. It's because those solder joints were cracked. So now that we've reflowed all those solder joints, we know that the amp is going to be functional again, because the amp was otherwise functional, aside from the fact that the microphone input was not working properly. And I don't physically see anything wrong with the jack, as I said before. So we're gonna assume that we did the right thing and put this back together. Has that shot me in the foot before? You're damn right it has. But you know what? You can do it your way, and I'm gonna do it mine. Get that other little standoff where it goes. Push this connector back in that was coming off. The effects plate thingamajig back where it goes. Excuse me. Just bashing the mic today. I already got these pretty snug with my fingers, but I'll just go in here with the wrench and just give them a nice little snug. You don't need to go crazy. These are made of plastic. They will strip. There we go. Those are nice and tight again. Now these screws, I'm going to start in the place where they go, but I'm not actually going to tighten them until I've tightened the stuff on the top, because you don't want it trying to pull this higher up than it wants to go with the screws installed. But I always like to at least get them lined up first. You know, since they go in this way and the board is going to go this way when you tighten all these. Nope. Can you tell I'm from the Midwest? Ope. Get in there. Alright, threaded in but not tightened. We'll get back up here, and for this, I'm going to do this the quicker way. Grab a 10mm socket. Once again, you don't have to tighten these like ridiculously tight. Just snug them until they feel secure, like they're not going to loosen. That's plenty. Cool. Now we can proceed to stick all the knobs back on. I know, this is just riveting content. You were sitting around and you thought, you know what I'd like to do? I'd like to listen to Ryan's soothing voice as he works on this cheap amplifier. customer that's not even his. Making sure nothing weird happened to the speaker connections and they feel good. Remounted, tightened. Remember what I was saying about over tightening things? That just cracked. I'm gonna go find another one. I'll be right back. So there you go. Found a new one. It's not plastic like the old one was, but on the bright side, it's not plastic like the old one was. You can see it just gave us a good old split. So I've got a nice metal one on there now, and that should be good to go. So we'll get this ground reconnected, make sure all of our other connections are happy. And let's get some of this stuff out of the way and plug this in and make sure that it works. I'm sure that it does, but what's that, Ryan? What did you say about things biting you in the ass? I just speak too soon sometimes. So here's what's happened. I've taken it back apart. I went to test it off camera. And partially because the mic cables that I was using, some of the ones I have suck. So I didn't want to have to put you guys through that. But here's what happened. I plugged it in. And if I turned up the level on the mic line, I got lots of volume, lots of preamp volume coming out. Absolutely no signal. And there's no real easy way to look at what's going on. So what happened is this tiny trace with this little pad. This is the contact that actually touches from tip to positive. The rest of these are ground. So when you don't have anything plugged into it, it's grounding this out so that that channel is silent. What's happened is this little pad that is on here that I just reflowed the solder joint, the actual solder pad, the little piece of track that goes there, is no longer connected to the trace that actually goes over to the input here. And I've got my meter on up there, and what you're going to hear is nothing. When I touch these together, there's no continuity between that and that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull all the solder off of that, and I'm going to very carefully scrape a bunch of the solder mask off of this trace. Actually, what I may do is I may end up just putting a piece of wire on top of it, because that'll be stronger in the long run. And I'm going to connect this physically over to here, and we should have that channel back again. So you guys are going to hang out with me, and we're going to do this together, because I told you we were doing this real time. Let me put my specs back on. Apologies for gratuitous seeing my vape sitting here. I don't drink, and I don't do any of the fun grass anymore. The only vice I have anymore is basically nicotine. So you'll have to pardon this being in my shots. But let's get in here. I would use my desoldering gun, but it takes several minutes to heat up, and it's literally for one thing, and I'm not going to wait that long for that. We're just going to get it hot, and we're going to use the solder sucker.
should do us just fine. Kind of hard when everything moves to actually get everything done. Yeah, I can see that the little pad is just coming up with the solder here. Got to recock the gun before you shoot it again. Now I'm gonna leave that little ring, that little piece of trace on there, just to help strengthen that joint a little bit. But what we're gonna do here is we're gonna get us a little piece of wire. I'm gonna go over to my ye old wire box. And actually I've got a little piece. Man, could I bump that any more times today? Got a little bit of wax-coated, pre-tinned stranded wire here. I can see that this actually goes to both of these. So I'm going to kind of go right in between them. And we'll leave ourselves a little bit extra so we can loop it around. Cut this, and then the trick is you actually pull this off, kind of feel where the end is, and you clip it off, and you stick it back on, and you've got two ends that are already done. What we'll do here is we're just going to kind of loop the end of this a bit. Get it around that contact, that trace, whatever you want to, whatever words you want to use. Wow, how did I manage to make that so much longer than what I actually needed? Recalculating. Need to make this a bit shorter. There we go. Get that on in place over that contact. We're going to use the, well, I don't know if we can use the helping hands here. I'd like for this to be held in place somehow. Oh, of course I don't have any. Oh, there's a clamp. If I can just clamp the circuit board in place so it doesn't move on me. There we go. Grab the solder again. Pre-tin the tip a little bit. Nice fat blob of solder on there. Get this moved into place, burn our fingers. Apologies for the mad amounts of boring silence at the moment. There, now we've got that going over to that contact. Get in here once again. And I'm going to go ahead and make a solder bridge actually between these sort of three things here. Make sure that's nice and strong. Yeah, that's looking good. So there you go. We've got a nice strong connection between here and here. Nice fat blob of solder, and that goes around that contact, so should be nice and strong and not move on us. So I'm going to save you guys the boring part of me putting this back together, and I'll come back when we test. Now, just to be fair and honest with you guys, we're going to test this live. So if it doesn't work, you can laugh at me.
Hello, hello. Hey, look at that. When the traces aren't broken, it actually works properly. Isn't that just a wonderful thing? Yes, it is. And if we turn the effects on, we can make it sound like we're in a bathroom at a high school. Isn't that just a wonderful thing? Yes, it is. Beautiful.
So there you go. Back to the way it should be again. Got that trace fixed, and she's good to go, so I can button it back up and get it back over to the shop that sent it over to me. And pretty cheap fix. Pretty easy stuff. So if you've got, if you've got a little cheap amplifier like this. Hi. How close are you? I don't even think I want to know. So if you have a cheap amplifier like this and you've got an issue where, the amp has been working fine otherwise, and maybe if you jiggle the cord you can get a little bit of signal now and again, that is often the case. Like I said earlier, a lot of these amplifiers, a lot of modern amplifiers have those jacks soldered directly to the PC board, and over time of cables going in and out and flexing and all that stuff, they break those connections. Oftentimes it's just the solder joint and you can resolder them. This one has particularly weak traces on it, so it took the whole sort of pad with it that pin comes through and gets soldered to. So we just reinforced it a little bit. That'll probably last the life of this amplifier at this point. So not too bad. Pretty cheap fix, pretty easy. And if you've got a couple of brain cells, you could probably do it too. That's it. Bye.